Right. Hey everyone, I'm Klloo. So, the High Seas Collectors page is up and about and comes with it some pretty useful information, but it always does interest me, the information that is lacking, right, from these pages. So, for reference, Bright Lights was actually the last set that were actually told directly that a card was short printed, so Maximum Velocity being a reprint, only featured as regular, no Rainbow Fall, and was short printed at 50%. So, for every other Majestic, right, there's 2 copies to every 1 Maximum Velocity. Now, we do know, for instance, in the Hunted, right, the Hunter's Glaive was short printed, and most likely all the other equipment is short printed. If we go back to prior sets to current times, right, so for instance, Dusk Till Dawn is the last proper breakdown where we get heroes being short printed at 50%, equipment being short printed at 60%, and legendary keyword cards like Oblivion being also short printed at 60%, right? And this sort of varies between 50% to 66%, but it would have been nice, especially with, for instance, the amulets, right, to know what cards were actually short printed, but alas, none of that details in High Seas. But we do have some other, again, useful bits of information, right? We have the general pull rates, which we will dive into and properly discuss in relation to the actual card pool size. But we also have the Marvel number, which on surface looks amazing, but another numbers case we will get to. But more importantly, what we'll start with is the treasure pack. So we don't have any of the pull rates for the actual treasure packs, so I would have personally liked to see, again, not specific rates, but at least a comparison of, the pirate treasure cards to the common cards, to legendaries to marvels. It feels about 1 common, 2 pirate cards, and then a legendary or a marvel in a case, for instance. But again, we don't have the exact rates specified. But what we do have is the entire list of lost treasures. So when lost treasures were announced, we were shown a nice beautiful collection of cards from James White's personal collection, as well as some print tests, right, from LSS. And altogether, it is very, very exciting, right? These were really, really cool cards to see, but we're given this rate of 1 in 1,000, right? And the cards that were expressed and shown meant that something wasn't adding up, right? At this rate, there wouldn't be enough boxes, right? The print run would be around 60,000 or something. So there had to be something in that lost treasure slot as part of the 43 different lost treasures to really fill up the gap. And the list that we ended up getting, I don't know how I really feel, because it's interesting and these are decent cards to include, but at the same time, boy, are they going to create really disappointing moments. So, for reference, the cards that are also part of the Lost Treasure slot are promo weapons from the first 2 sets, right? So, Romping Club all the way through to Crucible of Aetherweave, right? Weapon Wraith and Arcane Rising, signature weapons for the heroes. The heroes themselves in their original cold foil promo versions, right? And then the diamond. The diamond is just, this feels like they had extra and they just threw it in there, in all honesty, right? The diamond feels like a kind of a dumb choice. But anyway, I have basically the majority of these, minus the heroes, right? So for instance, he's a Death Dealer, right? So you can pull cold foil weapons, which again, due to their age, is kind of nice. I don't know if I can actually get the cold foil to show off, right? Can you see a little bit of the shine, hopefully, right? So yeah, these were buy box promos, as well as the initial armor event promos. So I'm not going to say they're too scarce, right? So to be a part of, again, the lustrous pool of these lost treasures with, again, those signed signature cards, all the original legendaries from first 3 sets, along with, again, the really other exciting stuff, the Prism Marvel, the Bravo print test double-sided no text Marvel, and of course the library, they do get a little bit disappointing, right? So another case, the hero, right? So I do have a Reiner promo. So these were the old cold foil styling for heroes, so I don't know when the change came about, but for instance, here's a KO promo as well, a young KO from Klloo. No foiling on the actual art of the card. Same with Reiner, right? So it's just the border foiling. I think for most people, hopefully, the one you would have seen is most likely a Cheyenne, right? So Cheyenne, the cold foil from Klloo, didn't have any foiling on the artwork, it's just bordering, right? But then, for instance, when they circled back around to the young Welcome to Wraith and Arcane Rising heroes, they did cold foil the art completely. So yeah, they're nice by way of oldness, but again, they weren't super scarce promos. They were just scarce by sense of the size of Fab at the time, right? So, for instance, if we go to the actual promos page, right? So all the weapons were, again, armory events or buy box promos. The heroes were a bit more exciting, right? And I think the heroes are fitting on the Lost Treasure list, but weapons and diamonds doesn't do it for me, right? So these were Welcome to Rathe release events, Road to Nationals top 8, and then Nationals actual participation back in 2020 for both the Welcome to Rathe and Arc Heroes. So they are pretty decent. I do think they get kind of overshadowed though by the Marvel inclusions from the history packs, right? Because generally speaking, they're double-sided, fully foiled artwork of the heroes, right? Which I think a lot of people are going to prize a lot more than just a cold foil border on the heroes. And then the diamond. So the diamond is a Alpha Investments exclusive, or I should say, was an Alpha Investments exclusive. It's a non-functional token at the current time, right? So it's basically the next step up from gold, which is action, destroy diamond, no cost, draw a card, go again, right? Whereas, gold, copper, silver all have a resource cost attached to it. So it works in conjunction with another exclusive promo, Diamond Hands, right? So Diamond Hands, I believe, is the only way to actually generate it, both of which were Alpha Investment exclusive promos. They're part of the special use promo case, so you can't use them in anything competitive either way, right? So the diamond itself just feels like an absolute dud draw. So yeah, when it comes to pulling a lost treasure, you have a chance at some of these really, really glorious, shown off, hyped up cards. And then you have these disappointments, right? And I think that's what really irks me about the situation. If this was disclosed at the get-go, rather than, again, really just highlighting the big pulls, I would have felt a little bit better about it. But imagine you hit that 1 in 1,000 rate, and you get a weapon, right? And you think it's super exciting, it's awesome, it's one of the first weapons, it's cold foil, and then you go to look online and it's not all that hard to find or all that valuable, again, in comparison to these other cards. And that, to me, that sense of disappointment that this slot now creates is really, really irksome, right? For lack of better words. But let's look at proper numbers, right, when we start there. So, for reference, the Lost Treasure, 1 in 1,000. There are 17 unique Lost Treasures. There are 34 Marvel heroes, including the 2 Bravo heroes. And then there are these 17 other cards, which again are the signature weapons, cold foil from the first 2 sets, the adult heroes from the first 2 sets in just cold foil bordering, right? And then diamonds. So if we sort of estimate at High Seas print run, right, so around 200,000 to 300,000 boxes, this means that those other 17 cards total somewhere between 149 to 249, which means about 9 to 15 copies of these cards, although I would highly assume they're skewed, right? And there's probably more diamonds than there are weapons than there are heroes, right? The heroes, I would assume, are going to be the harder of the 3 to pull, but again, all these are definitely going to be more apparent than those really big cards. So, when we look at the specific rates, if you will, so again, looking at these card pools individually, so the unique cards being the top hits, the Marvel heroes being the in-between, and then the others being the bottom, well, the numbers are pretty crazy. So for reference, Marvel Emperor, one of the rarest cards in Flesh and Blood in terms of pulling it, right, was a rate of 1 in 417 boxes. Now, a unique comes in at somewhere between 1 in 11,764 to 17,647 boxes, right? So these are insanely hard to pull, right? Marvel's 1 in 5,882 to somewhere around 8,824, right? So again, these are between that rate of 200 to 300,000, which is where we would assume High Seas is at. So then for the other cards, they are still roughly 3 times rarer than pulling a Marvel Emperor from Dynasty, right? So somewhere between 1,342 to 12,000. And as opposed to the others, right, the larger the print size, the easier, in a sense, the other selection of cards is to pull. So yeah, overall, it's just fundamentally, a lot of people are going to hit a Lost Treasure, right? Because a lot of High Seas is going to be opened. And they're going to get something not all that exciting in relation to the actual cards. Now, again, personally, due to their age, I don't mind these being included. I just wish they were disclosed, right? So hitting a hero is still kind of exciting, right? It's still a decently valuable card. It's something really, really old and collectible from Flesh and Blood. It's one of the first cold foil promos, which is definitely something to keep in mind. The weapons, not so much, since they were kind of, handed out like candy, right? And then the diamonds, I don't know what's going on with that, right? Again, it was a Alpha Investment exclusive, but this breaks that, so it definitely, to me, feels like they just had a bunch extra printed and lying around that they stuck in here, right? So Yeah, and unless there becomes some functional use for diamonds, which I doubt it, because again, it just breaks that rate being traded to draw a card. I can't see LSS ever doing anything really functional with it in a set, but I may be wrong. So, yeah, how do you feel? How do you feel about the treasure slot and these other lost treasure inclusions? I was really hoping for, even if it was something similar to Enigma, right? I mean, New Moon Enigma, right? So it was just Rainbow Fallen and Marvel of a unique hero. Heck, it could have been Scurv. Obviously, Scurv is the skirmish promo, right? But that would have been really cool. I think Scurv would have been the perfect card to stick in the Lost Treasure to, again, keep those numbers afloat. I think a lot of people would have still been really, really happy pulling it, right? But I think pulling a Romping Club, a Death Dealer, a Kadachi, Dawnblade's probably the better of the lot, right? Is definitely not going to feel that great, right? Again, when the focal point was put on these really, really exciting lost treasures. So aside from that, right, that's the treasure packs done. What about the actual pull rates? Well, we'll start with the Marvels. So the Marvels are at 1 in 60 packs. So roughly 1 to 2 a case, right? Which is definitely really nice because obviously the pool is quite extensive. There are 21 Marvels, but 15 of them are allies. And the allies, technically speaking, you want 3 copies of to complete a set. Now, comparatively, we didn't get the Marvel rates for the Hunted or for Rosetta, but we did get for Part Misval. Part Misval was 1 per 100, 18 Marvels in total, 17 actually, right, because Enigma was one of them. And then heavy hitters, we have 10 Marvels at a rate of 1 in 92, but these were all just the hero Marvels, right? So, generally speaking, on the surface, High Seas definitely looks really, really nice, right? 1 per 60. But again, if we then start to dive into the numbers, right? So High Seas at 21 Marvels at 1 in 60 means that to open the population, right, would be 1,260 packs. Missed fail, 1,700. Heavy hitters, 1920, right? So generally speaking, High Seas is a lot easier to pull. But due to the amount of cards you have to collect, right? So actually, to pull a playset of the Marvels, that means there are 51 cards. Again, there are 15 allies, and you want 3 apiece, so that's 45 there, and then the 6 heroes. So there are 51 Marvels in total to collect, which means that it's about 3,060 packs per complete set, right? So the pull rate, while being 1.5 times that of the other sets, which is definitely really nice, again, factoring the card pull, right, for the actual rates, the set rate is 0.6 times, right? So it's harder in total to pull the total population of Marvel heroes, which definitely makes sense. There is a ton of them. They couldn't really just, jerk the rates. They've done a decent job, but that is still something to put in perspective, right? Again, by and large, the playable ones, due to, again, the sheer size of the amount of Marvels in High Seas, means that they will probably retain a decent price, right? So, yeah, on the surface, it looks good. If we really dive into it, it may be not that great, right? So, yeah, have fun collecting them, right? It's a little bit better, but at the same time, still going to be pretty difficult, right? Per, again, full complete set of Marvels for High Seas, and the majority of people are obviously going to care more about the allies than the heroes. So I'm hoping that there are subtle tweaks in that as well, whereas the heroes are maybe a bit less common than the allies in totality. But we'd have to see. Again, that's not really the microscope lens in terms of the numbers that we generally get with these pages. So then that just leaves us with the actual Majestics, right? So 46 Majestics in total for High Seas, as well as one big hefty change, which is heroes are no longer Majestics, right? And this does matter because they were counted as Majestics for this number. So there are 46 Majestics, but at the same time, 3 of the normal guaranteed Majestics by way of heroes are now part of the basic or tokens, right? Until we're, a few sets in with basic, I'm going to probably use both or go back in between, so sorry for the confusion. But yeah, so there's 46 Majestics, for instance, in comparison to the Hunted. Hunted had 42 Majestics, but again, 3 of them are the heroes. So really, the Hunted had 39 Majestics, right? So 39 to 46 looks bad on the surface, right? We can then factor in some short prints. So for instance, High Seas has the plethora of amulets, 9 amulets, all being most likely short printed, somewhere between that 50% to 60%. I'm going to say 50% because they don't come in rainbow foil, right? So that's usually where LSS sticks, right? With, again, reference to bright lights. So yeah, High Seas still has a huge amount of Majestics, right? It has less expansion slot Majestics as well than the Hunted. So numbers wise, High Seas to the Hunted, right? 46 to 42. No heroes in high seas, 3 in the hunted. So limited Majestics, there are 33 in high seas versus 24 in the hunted. And expansion, there are 13 in high seas to 15 in the hunted, right? Because remember, the clave is part of the expansion slot for the hunted. So if we adjust for short printing, with the legendary keyword being 50% short printed and equipment/weapons being 66% short printed, which may not always be the case again, sometimes that's around 60%, this means that the adjusted size, right, for limited Majestics is 28.5 for high seas versus 24 for the hunted. So there are still, again, more Majestics overall in high seas, right, even accounting for short printing. And then for the expansion slot, 12.33 to 11.83 for the hunted. So even the expansion slot, there are more Majestics to collect because we had quite the chunk of equipment in the hunted, right? We had a weapon and 3 bits of equipment, I believe, versus high seas just with the 1 claw, right? So our Majestic rate for limited Majestics is 1 per 5.88 packs, right? So the way we work this out is we know rares are declared at 1.83 per pack, so we can reverse engineer since we know a limited Majestic replaces a rare, while an expansion slot Majestic replaces a basic/token card. The expansion slot, right, is then 1 in 12.5 packs, meaning that we can again work out the rate per playset. So limited versus expansion for high seas and hunted. So we have packs, boxes, and cases, and the overall increase of 18%, which again is a continued trend that we have talked about before, where even though rates are not changing, LSS keep marginally increasing the actual card pool size for Majestics, making Majestics overall harder to pull, right? So high seas, it would take around 503 packs. Again, this is not factoring in randomness, but using the mentality of us collectively as a community, opening packs to complete playsets. So it would take 503 packs to open a playset of all the limited Majestics. So that's 1 of all the amulets and 3 of all the other cards, versus the hunted at 424 for the expansion slot, 462 for high seas, and 444 packs for the hunted. So this is, again, an increase on both the limited and expansion side of the cards. So I think importantly is the box rate, right? So about 22 boxes for high seas per playset versus the hunted at 18. So that is basically the difference of a case. For high seas, in order to, again, facilitate full playsets of cards, there needs to be 1 extra case over that of the hunted. So even if, for instance, their print run was exactly the same, that would mean that high seas is reflectively smaller per the actual playsets of cards being delivered to the community, which again is the worrisome nature, since high seas itself features a bunch of new cards, B, a bunch of new cards that support new archetypes and deck construction, right? And therefore the majority of Majestics are actually truly playable, more so than that of the hunted, right? So yeah, this is the trend that I don't like that continues to increase, but it is what it is. So hopefully we get a severe course correction for the last set of the year in terms of print size, and then hopefully at some point, right, pull rates being reined in a little bit more. But there we go. Collector's page and the actual numbers breakdown. Right, what do you think? How do you feel about high seas knowing all of this? Let me know. Hope you enjoyed. See ya.